with a scratch along one edge that happened in 1987 when my son dragged a toy truck across it without thinking. I never had it repaired. After a while, that scratch just became part of the table, part of the house, part of us. That table is where we put the birthday cakes every year, the ones with too many candles and not enough frosting. It is where my children did their homework while I stood at the stove behind them, half listening, half cooking, fully present in the way only a mother in her own home can be. It is where my husband Gerald and I had the arguments that married people have, the real ones, about money and fear and exhaustion, and where we always, eventually, found our way back to each other. Gerald died 3 years ago, a Tuesday in November, quiet and without warning. And after that, the table became mine alone. I am 74 years old. I have lived in the same house since 1974, the year Gerald and I built it. Not with our own hands exactly, but with our own decisions, our own savings, our own sense of what a life was supposed to look like. It was a modest house, 3 bedrooms, a side yard, a garden in the back that I have tended every spring since the beginning. We were never wealthy, but we were solid. The house was paid off. We had savings, not extravagant savings, but enough to feel safe, enough to feel like the ground beneath us was real. I want you to understand that feeling because it matters for what comes next. That feeling of standing on ground that belongs to you. That feeling of knowing, without having to think about it, that you are secure. I had 2 children, Karen, the older one, practical and direct, the kind of person who reads the fine print before she signs anything, and David, the younger one. David was always the charming one. He had a smile that could rearrange a room. He was the kind of person who walked into a situation and immediately understood how to make people feel comfortable around him. I loved that about him. I also, somewhere in the back of my mind, always knew it was a skill he had learned, not just a quality he was born with. But you don't let yourself think too hard about the things you love about your children. David always had a plan. That was the other thing about him. There was always something on the horizon, always a business idea or an investment opportunity or a project that was going to change things. Some of them went somewhere. Most of them didn't. But he kept going. Kept arriving with enthusiasm and folders and the energy of someone who genuinely believed the next thing would be different. I think that is what I have to understand now. He probably believed it. He came on a Thursday in early October. He was dressed nicely. Not a suit, but a collared shirt. Neat, the way he dressed when he wanted to be taken seriously. He had a folder under his arm. He was smiling when I opened the door. The same smile he used to give me as a boy when he had already done something and needed my agreement before I realized it. I made coffee. He sat down at the table. He set the folder between us. He said the papers were just a formality, something about refinancing, protecting my assets, he said, making sure everything was structured correctly now that Gerald was gone. He talked for a while using words that sounded reasonable, words that fit together in a way that made it seem like he had thought this through carefully and was presenting me with the responsible option. I did not read the papers. I want you to sit with that for a moment. Not because I want your pity, but because I think a lot of people listening to this have done the same thing. You don't read something because the person handing it to you is someone you have known since before they could walk. You don't read it because reading it would imply that you don't trust them, and not trusting them feels worse in that moment than whatever the papers might say. I signed where he pointed. 3 places, maybe 4. He thanked me, closed the folder, and we finished our coffee. He told me about a restaurant he had been to. He asked about my garden. He hugged me at the door the same way he always did. That was a Tuesday. By the following spring, I no longer owned my home. It did not happen all at once. That is the thing I keep trying to explain when I talk about it, though I don't talk about it often. It happened the way certain kinds of damage happen, slowly, quietly, in ways that don't look like damage when you're in the middle of them. A few weeks after David's visit, the phone calls started. Numbers I didn't recognize, calling at odd times, sometimes leaving messages in an automated voice about accounts and reference numbers that meant nothing to me. I assumed they were wrong numbers at first. Spam, maybe. Gerald had always handled most of the financial paperwork, and I will be honest with you. After he died, I let some things go unread longer than I should have. Karen called me one evening in November just to check in the way she does. She asked if everything was all right. I told her about the phone calls, mentioned offhand that David had stopped by with some refinancing paperwork a few weeks back. She was quiet for a moment. That particular kind of quiet that I have learned means she is thinking carefully before she speaks. She asked if I still had copies of what I signed. I didn't. David had taken the folder. She said she was going to call him. He did not answer. She left a message. He called back 2 days later and told her it was nothing to worry about, that he was handling everything, that she didn't need to involve herself. When she pushed, he became irritated in the way that people become irritated when they want to end a conversation without answering any of the questions in it. Then the letter came. It arrived on a Thursday, in a plain white envelope with a bank's name in the upper left corner. A bank I had never used, never opened an account at, never walked into. Inside was a document with my name on it and my address and language I had to read 4 or 5 times before any of it started to come together. My house, the one Gerald and I had paid off decades ago, was listed as collateral against a loan. I called David. He answered on the 3rd ring. He sounded calm. He told me not to worry, that this was part of the process, that it was being managed, that I didn't understand how these structures work, and that he would explain it properly when he had more time. He said it in a kind voice, a patient voice, the voice you use with someone you have decided doesn't need to know the full truth. I believed him. I am aware of how that sounds. I believed him anyway. In the months that followed, he called periodically to ask for small transfers from my savings account. A few hundred here, 1,000 there. Always for fees, he said. Processing costs, temporary gaps. He always said temporarily. He said it so often that the word started to feel meaningless, the way a word does when you've said it too many times in a row. I made the transfers. I did not keep close track. I trusted that he was doing what he said he was doing. Meanwhile, something changed in the house itself. I can't describe it except to say that I felt it. I would stand in the garden in the morning before it was warm, with my hands around a mug of tea, looking at the back of the house, at the windows, the paint that needed touching up on the south side, the roof I had been meaning to have looked at. And something in me felt different. A kind of unease that I didn't have a name for. Like the house was still there, but was somehow already in the process of leaving. My neighbor, Edith, who is a few years younger than me and worked as an accountant for most of her life, noticed the bank envelopes stacking up on my hall table one afternoon when she stopped by. She didn't say anything right away. She helped me with the tea and we talked about nothing. And then, as she was leaving, she paused and asked, gently, whether I had spoken to a lawyer about any of the financial things I had mentioned. I told her I hadn't, that it was family, that David was handling it. She nodded. She didn't push. But she said very simply that it might be worth having someone else look at the paperwork, just to understand it. I told her I would think about it. I did not call a lawyer. It did not occur to me, not really, that I needed one. Not for this. Not for my own son. Karen drove over on a Saturday morning in late February. She didn't call first. I heard her car in the driveway, and when I opened the door, she already had her coat half off, and her expression was one I recognized from when she was 16 and had made a decision she wasn't going to move from. She had one of the letters in her hand. She had gone through my mail, with my permission, after I had finally mailed her copies of the envelopes I hadn't opened. She sat down at the kitchen table. I made coffee, because that is what I do at that table, and she spread the letter flat and read it aloud to me. I want you to understand what it is like to listen to your own life described in language you don't recognize. To hear your address, your name, your house, all the coordinates of 50 years of living, laid out in a document that treats them as variables in someone else's transaction. It is a very particular kind of disorientation, like reading a story and slowly realizing it is about you and that you were not the one who wrote it. The house had been used as collateral for a business loan taken in David's name, a business that had, by the time Karen was reading this letter, already failed. The loan was in default. Because the house was collateral, the bank had a claim against it, a legal claim, a valid one. While she read, I sat with my hands around my coffee cup the way I always sit, and I did not cry. I don't know why I didn't cry. I just sat there and let the information come in and felt it settle somewhere deep and quiet inside me. We called David. He didn't answer. Karen tried twice. Then she sent a message asking him to call back immediately, that this could not wait. He did not call back. About an hour later, a text message arrived. I still remember it almost word for word because I have read it many times since. It said, "I was going to fix it. I just ran out of time." That was all. I have thought about those words a great deal. I have turned them over and looked at them from different directions. And what I have come to believe, not with anger, but with a kind of exhausted clarity, is that they were true. I think he genuinely believed, until very near the end, that he would find a way to fix it before I ever had to know. That is not a comfort, exactly, but it is something. It tells me that some part of him did not want this. That does not make it better, but it makes it something other than pure malice, and understanding that has mattered to me in the long process of figuring out how to carry this. Karen found a lawyer by the end of that week. He was a kind man, methodical and honest in the way that good lawyers are. He looked at everything I could gather, the documents David had me sign, the bank letters, the records of the wire transfers, and he told me what I already understood by then, but had not yet heard, said plainly. The signatures were valid. The documents were legal. I had signed in full consent, even if I hadn't understood what I was consenting to. There was very little recourse. He said he was sorry. I believed he meant it. That evening I went out to the garden. It was still cold, too early in the year for anything to be growing, just bare soil and the dead stalks from last summer's plants that I hadn't yet cut back. I sat on the bench Gerald had put there in 1991, the wooden one that had gone gray over the years, and I looked at the back of the house, the south-facing windows, the roof line against the gray sky, and I understood, sitting there, that the house behind me might not be mine much longer. Not as an idea, not as a fear, but as a fact I was looking at directly, as something true. The months that followed were procedural. That is the only word for it. Legal proceedings do not make space for the history of a house or the years that happened inside it. They are interested in amounts and dates and signatures, and those things were not in my favor. The lawyer advised me to sell before the bank acted, because that way I would at least have some agency in the process and might recover a small amount after the debt was settled. We listed the house in April. I signed another set of papers, this time reading every word and understanding very little of the language, but understanding the meaning behind it, which was that this was ending. Karen came every weekend. We went through 50 years, room by room. What to keep, what to give away, what to let go of without ceremony, because holding on to everything is its own kind of weight. We didn't talk much while we worked. I think we both knew that talking too much would break something that we needed to stay intact in order to finish. The scratch on the kitchen table, I kept. The table itself went to Karen's house, where her own children do their homework now. I moved in June. A small apartment 2 towns over on the second floor of a building that is clean and well-maintained and entirely without memory. The ceilings are lower than I am used to. The windows face west. It is quiet in the mornings, which is something. One of the first things I did was go to the garden center and buy a tomato plant in a pot. I put it on the balcony. It is not the same as a garden. I know that. But the action of putting something in soil and expecting it to grow, that action means something to me. It always has. I wasn't ready to give it up entirely. David left a voicemail in August. I did not listen to it immediately. When I did, I could hear that he had planned what he wanted to say and then lost his place in the middle of it. He said he was sorry several times. He said he hadn't meant for it to happen this way. He said he hoped I was all right. I did not call back. I want to be honest about why, because it would be easy to say I was punishing him, but that is not the truth. The truth is that I had no response that was both honest and kind. Honest would have been more than I was ready to say. Kind would have been more than he had earned. And so I said nothing, and I have continued to say nothing, and I have made a kind of peace with that silence. What took me longer to understand, and this has been the real work of this time, the internal work that no lawyer and no moving box could do, is that the grief I was carrying was not only about the house. The house was a container for something larger. What I lost was a version of my son that I had held in my mind for decades, a version that I had maintained, perhaps against evidence. The charming boy with the plans, the one who would figure it out eventually, the one who meant well even when things went badly. I had been protecting that version of him, quietly, continuously, for a long time. And what happened last year required me, finally, to put it down. I did it quietly, without ceremony, the way you let go of things when you are too tired to make it into something larger than it is. I am sitting at a different table now. It is smaller than the oak one. I found it secondhand, and it has no history that I know of, which is strange to get used to. It sits by the window that looks out onto the street, and in the mornings I bring my coffee here, and I watch the neighborhood doing what neighborhoods do. People walking dogs, a man who runs past at the same time every day, children on their way to somewhere. I think about the 1974 kitchen sometimes, the birthday cakes, the homework, the arguments that ended with Gerald laughing even when he didn't want to, because I could always find the thing that made him laugh. I think about the garden in early May, when everything was beginning, and the particular quality of light in the back bedroom in the late afternoon, and the sound the furnace made in January, which was a sound I complained about every winter, and which I would give a great deal to hear now. I am not broken, I want to say that clearly, because I think there is an expectation, when something like this happens to a person my age, that they are destroyed by it. I am not destroyed. I am also not the same as I was. I am something between those two things, in a place that doesn't have a clean name, and I have come to accept that this is probably where most honest lives eventually land. Not in triumph or in ruin, but somewhere in the middle, carrying what you have to carry and learning to find enough light to see by. I do not wish that I had never had David. I don't know how to stop loving him, and I have decided not to try. That love is real and it is mine, even if what he did is also real and also mine to carry. I do not know how to resolve that contradiction into something neat. I have stopped trying to do that as well. What I know now, and I say this to whoever is listening, because I think it is worth saying plainly, is that a signature is not a small thing. I do not care how many times you have trusted someone, how long you have known them, how much you love them. A document that changes the legal reality of your life deserves to be read by you, fully, before your name goes on it. Trust is not the same as wisdom. Love is not a substitute for understanding. And the people most able to use your trust against you are the ones you gave it to most freely. I am not saying this with bitterness. I am saying it the way you say something true that you wish you had known sooner. The tomato plant on the balcony is doing well. Better than I expected, actually. It has more sun than I thought it would. I water it in the mornings before the heat comes, and I watch it slowly become what it was going to be all along. And there is something in that I find calming, though I couldn't fully explain why. I watch the street. I drink my coffee. I sit with what is. I don't know what I'm waiting for, but I'm still here. And some mornings, that feels like enough.